Hi, everyone, and welcome to Vuga Mobility News. My name is Timothy Adrigwe, and today I'm joined by one of South Africa's leading voices in sustainable engineering and innovation. With me today is Professor Thinus Booysen, Professor of Engineering at Stellenbosch University, where he's been at the forefront of smart energy systems, electric mobility, and the role of data in shaping resilient people focused infrastructure. He'll be speaking at the Smarter Mobility Africa Summit 2025 under the new energy vehicles and infrastructure theme. And today we're having a relaxed conversation ahead of the summit just to get a sense of what he'll be sharing and what and how academic research is shaping Africa's mobility future. Thank you for coming on board, Professor Tiernes.
Morning, Timothy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So today we just want to ask a few questions. I think starting with what core message or idea you hope to communicate during your talk at Smarter Mobility Africa 2025.
Timothy, I think we have so many problems and challenges in this country and so many opportunities that one core message, just extracting one core message is slightly difficult. But one of the key things I want to convey is that we have, because of our many challenges, we've got many opportunities, and we need to seriously plan so that we can leverage this transition to electric mobility for the better of transportation and the better of our society in South Africa. With this transition comes a very unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to rethink mobility and to use this transformation to improve the livelihoods of all the people in the country. I don't think people appreciate how crucial mobility is in growth and economic development. So that's one of the core messages I want to convey. The other sub message is, in Africa, mobility is different and energy is different, and therefore our challenges are unique, and we need to kind of rethink the whole solution and the whole transformation to ensure that we don't propose solutions that are not fit for purpose.
That's a wonderful point. I think the only way to get through challenges is to see them as opportunities. So I like how you pointed that out. And with that, I would like to ask what you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities in scaling new energy vehicle adoption and infrastructure in South Africa.
I think, sorry to answer in this weird way, but I think the way that you phrase the question is the way that many people think about it. It's like, what can we do? What do we need to do to scale this up? I think we first need to ask ourselves, do we want to scale up? Do we want to just leapfrog into an electric mobility system that isn't supported by infrastructure? And I think before we can get to that point, we need to carefully think about energy infrastructure. So if the question is, what are we supposed to do towards electric mobility, where we're going to end up eventually, and to get there quicker, I think the answer is to put in place the necessary infrastructure to support that mobility, and I mean energy infrastructure. Also, to very carefully think about local production of vehicles to ensure that local jobs are maintained, local skills are leveraged and not lost. And then I think the other thing is to also, as I said, just carefully think about how it benefits society and how people can make money from this, but how sustainable development can also be supported through it. For me, that's the way to scale it up.
No, that's a wonderful point. Local production to ensure employment stays local. That's a very good point. And how do you think academic research and innovation drive smarter, more sustainable mobility solutions, particularly in the African context?
Yeah, good question. So as I said earlier, our environment is just so vastly different than what you would get in China or in the EU or in America or in Britain. What the place of an academic is, in my point of view, it's manifold, but the most important thing is we're there to answer the questions that industry doesn't have time to think about or don't want to think about, or that doesn't directly speak to profit and maybe answers broader questions. For example, looking at equity, looking at not a good example is Henry Ford. Henry Ford said, if you asked people what they wanted years ago, they would have said faster horses. And I think that speaks to the point that people don't necessarily think about the deeper questions and think about the bigger picture. And I think that's where academics come in, especially in Africa, given that our environment is different. Just to give you a concrete example, we've been developing some simulation models here in Stellenbosch that matches African mobility patterns and African driving conditions and African environments, because those environments manifest differently in the electrical domain than what they would in a European or a Chinese or a US context. The other thing that I think academics have a very important role to play, in a region such as sub-Saharan Africa that's very much resource constrained, there's also a lot of distrust and a lot of competition between industry partners. And I think what universities and academic institutions bring to the party is trust, and they can act as a bridging opportunity between the industry partners and help people play together, also overcoming some of the information burden between industry and society.
That is a wonderful point. I think trust is necessary in terms of the adoption of new energy vehicles in the country. We do need to get the trust of the community, which is maybe something we haven't fully got to the point of yet. And where are we seeing progress in energy infrastructure or vehicle technology, and what lessons can be applied broadly?
Yeah, good question. So let's just go back to the trust issue real quickly. I think that a very concrete example of that is the minibus taxi sector, right? So this is not something you find in the developed world. So there's a lot of distrust, firstly, just because these systems are, it's very desperate driving conditions. They're very desperate financial conditions as well. The margins are thin. And obviously, given our historical context, there's a level of distrust. But also what makes it interesting is there's a distributed ownership system, which is completely different to what you would find in the developed world. In the developed world, you've got certain entities doing quite a few buses, or they do it centrally from a local council. In our context, we've got 20,000 owners owning 250 to 300,000 minibus taxis in the country. And how to electrify that, how to bring that to new energy vehicles is a very big challenge if you're talking about capital investment and you're talking about people who are from the onset already on a lower financial level than what you would find typical electric vehicle owners being. So to get back to your question, maybe you can rephrase that. Sorry, I got sidetracked.
The question was, where are we seeing meaningful progress in energy infrastructure or vehicle technology, and what lessons can be applied more broadly?
Yeah. Good question. I think what we do see in South Africa is that companies like Grid Cars and Rubicon are clearly leading the way in installing charging infrastructure, right? And that's very much driven by private vehicle ownership and looking to some extent also freight type of vehicles. I think the sad news is, apart from that, we're not seeing a lot happening at all. I'm going to give you a few things that I think are well, actually, let me add one. The other thing is on conversions. So conversion of petrol and diesel vehicles to new electric vehicles. I think that's an opportunity. We've seen some growth, but now that's stalled because there's no legislation in place to support the conversion of petrol and diesel vehicles to electric, which is a fantastic stepping stone towards building the skills, developing the local skills, and towards making vehicles locally. Where we're not progressing, where we're struggling, is really things like the energy infrastructure behind the chargers that need to support the charging of the vehicles. Fortunately, we've got one company in South Africa called ZCC, not the religion, but the zero carbon charge, it's called. And I think they just call themselves Charge these days. So they've got completely off-grid chargers. That's a very nice or at least that's a very nice step forward in the technology adoption for South Africa, because it takes the load off the grid. Other place where we're falling flat, I don't think we're transitioning quickly enough to producing electric vehicles in the country, and we're not moving fast enough to incorporate producers from other parts of the world. So at the moment, 70% of our vehicles are exported to Europe, and these are almost exclusively petrol and diesel vehicles. They will stop being exported very soon because Europe doesn't want our vehicles anymore. We need to desperately transition, and at the moment we're holding on to a few European manufacturers and Japanese manufacturers in the country. We need to seriously either push them towards producing electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles, plug-in hybrid vehicles, or we need to very urgently start talking to Chinese manufacturers to also produce vehicles here. And I'm not just talking about passenger vehicles. I'm talking about minibus taxis. I'm talking about delivery vehicles, buses, trucks, and even trains. Australia, for example, I don't know if you know this, Australia is working on electric trains, and they're using South African skills in Pretoria to develop this. But us, we're not really progressing on that front and doing the same level of investment on electrical infrastructure for rail. Although our rail is electric, we're not pushing nearly enough effort into taking stuff off the road and moving stuff on rail and using electricity for it.
That is actually a very interesting point and one I don't think many people think about. And I would like to know that what role do you think cross-sector collaborations between universities, government, and industry can play in advancing NEV ecosystems?
Good question. So I think I'll use an example to demonstrate how it could be done. So we've been working with an entity called SANEDI, the South African National Energy Institute. I can't remember what the Development Institute, as a parastatal, and they've received funding from DSI and from what used to be called the DMRE. I think they're now DEE. They've been funding some of our research here to build an ecosystem and to collaborate with industry. So what us as a university has done is put down a research lab, pulled in PhD, master students, and a few researchers at the university, focused our attention on electric mobility. I think at the moment we're somewhere between 15 and 20 researchers working on it actively. And we've reached out our hands to industry players all the way to Melevans in Cape Town, Golden Arrow in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, RAM Equipment, balance cell battery manufacturers. We've been reaching out to all these entities and acting as a bridge, as I said earlier, to build the ecosystem and to build knowledge centrally. And because we're working with government and we're working with these industry players, it ensures that what we're doing is relevant. The questions we're answering is stuff that they actually want answered, and the stuff that they're working on, we can help them with. And what is interesting, Timothy, is we've actually crossed beyond the South African boundaries now, or borders now, where in addition to working with companies like Rubicon and Skatec, we're actually working with a few companies in Nairobi now, because they've seen that we've built this ecosystem and they're using our knowledge and our expertise to help them develop their projects on electric vehicles. So Rome Electric, for example, in Nairobi, or Basigo, or EED in Nairobi, all of these entities are reaching out to us because government was willing to put down money and to help us fund this research. And I think that's how it's supposed to work. We act as a channel for knowledge, and industry plays with us, contributes, and we all benefit in the end.
Well, that's a wonderful thing to hear, that as a channel for knowledge, so much is being done behind the scenes that maybe people might not be aware of. And I think in closing, I would just like to ask you, with this year's theme being embracing the new urban era through smarter mobility, how do you interpret that from the perspective of engineering and innovation?
I interpret that as we have an opportunity to transition and to improve the way in which people move, to make the way in which people move more safe, more secure, by leveraging this opportunity of the electric transformation. So because of electric vehicles being what they are, and the high level of technology in them, it gives the opportunity to also include a lot of smart technology in this technology. And by introducing these technologies, we can definitely make the system more efficient and more safe for everybody, especially the poor and especially the vulnerable people in our society. Because if we do that, all of us will benefit yet again. If all of us move in a more elegant and more efficient and safe way, we will all benefit, and our economy will benefit from it as well. At the moment, too many people who are productive in our economy are stuck in poor transport systems, losing time, which they could be spending with their families, or they could be spending doing work, building our economy.
Well, that is a wonderful point. Moving efficiently and safely, I think it's very, very important going forward. Those would be two key components that people look at when going into new energy vehicles across the continent. And with that, I would just like to thank you for your time and for such a thought-provoking conversation. It's clear that the shift towards smarter mobility and more sustainable mobility will not require only technological advances, but also cross-sector thinking, rigorous research, and deep understanding of African realities, which I feel like you alluded to very clearly. And we're looking forward to your session at the Smarter Mobility Africa Summit 2025, taking place from the 30th of September to the 3rd of October at the Santon Convention Center. And thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate the value you've put in.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Timothy. See you there.
Thank you.